Shana Tova, everybody. Kol od balevav penima, nefesh Yehudi homia, ulfateh mizrach kadima, ein letzion Sophia. Od lo avda tikvatenu, hatikva bat shnot alpayim, lihiot am chofshi be'artzenu, Eretz Tzion v'Yerushalayim. As long as in the heart within, the Jewish soul stirs and yearns, and toward the eastern edges onward, an eye gazes towards Zion. Our hope is not yet lost. The hope of 2,000 years, to be a free nation in our land, the land of Zion and Jerusalem. Hatikva, the hope. Israel's national anthem expresses the yearning of the Jewish spirit. Written by Jewish poet Naftali Herz Imber in 1878. He recited it to a young 17 or 18-year-old Shmuel Cohen in 1887 in Rishon LeZion, what was then Ottoman-ruled Palestine. Cohen wrote the music based on a melody that he had learned in Romania. Little did these young men know that it would catch on and become the spontaneously sung anthem 61 years later, at the moment that the state of Israel would be reborn, May 14th, 1948, in the future city of Tel Aviv. It didn't even exist yet. These two Jews brought together the poetry and music of an ancient promise that started between God and Abraham, rekindled at the Exodus from Egypt, realized under Joshua, and then realized again in 1948. For thousands of years, Jews have dreamt ahead toward the promise of Zion, toward the promise of a redeemed future. But, as Rabbi philosopher David Hartman used to say, the real life of the state of Israel is not always a dream. Life is not written in poetry, he would say. It's written in prose. A future ideal is imagined and clean. A lived and real life is messy, complex, and has warts. I've been thinking a lot about Israel and Zionism, as I'm sure so many of us have as well. Since October 7th, 2023, so much has blown up around us. It has been difficult to breathe, to keep our equilibrium. We used to make sense of the world, and now it feels like it's coming apart. What is happening to our world? I wondered that question when I had a very interesting conversation with a young Gen Zer. This is someone who has been to Israel several times, who loves it, loves the Jewish people. But when I brought up the struggles that we as a Jewish people have today with anti-Zionism, this person winced, made a face. I asked, what was that about? And they said they were ambivalent about the word Zionism. They weren't anti, but they were ambivalent. Somehow Zionism had the vibe of a four-letter word for this person. I was flabbergasted. Why? What is to be ambivalent about Zionism? What's to be ambivalent about the reality of a Jewish state that protects its citizens and stands as a bulwark of security for Jews around the world? What on earth is there to be ambivalent about? Are you buying the propaganda of the anti-Israel hate machine that has spread this all over the world? How on earth could this person think this way? I immediately thought it was social media, or bad education, or just simply negligent parenting. But then I realized it was because in this person's 20-something years, all they have ever known is a brutally powerful Israel led by Bibi Netanyahu, a very tough politician. An Israel that has regularly gone to war with high body counts of Palestinians with no end in sight. For this person, regardless of any historical perspective, Zionism has been identified by brute power. But that's not what Zionism has meant to me or to the Jewish people. To us, and now I have to admit it, in the older generation, this power is consoling because we remember the consequences of Jewish powerlessness. And it has only been recently that Zionism has been besmirched by its gift of great power, but recently accounts for this younger generation's entire lifetime. My friends, it's Rosh Hashanah. It's a time of contemplative renewal. Today we open ourselves to renew our commitments and relationships. This is a time to write a new poem, a love letter to who could and should be our future selves. It's time to dream again. As Hatikva became for all Jews, let us bequeath a new poetry to the young and coming generations about what Zionism is and what it should be. Hope and redemption. Let us ask ourselves, right now, what inspires you? What inspires us as Jews? What causes you to dream? What should cause the Jews to dream? What gives our Judaism and our lives purpose? What role should Israel play in it? Let us remember the poetry of meaning, even if history is lived in prose. I became myself a true lover of Zionism when I heard Rabbi David Hartman at UCLA in the 1990s. The advent of the modern state of Israel, he said, proposed a fresh challenge to the Jewish people. That we created a halacha during our 2,000 years of exile, a halacha that helped us adapt to powerlessness. But now, Hartman bellowed, We need a new halacha, a new Judaism that institutionalizes how a Jewish state should use its newfound power. There is defense, but there is also, he underscored, responsibility. It can't only be about what we must do to survive. We must now think about what it means to build and create a thriving Jewish society. Now that we're home, what kind of life do we want represented in our home? What do we want to represent to the world? What do we want to offer the world? The poetry of this charge to Zionism solidified in my soul, and that's when I felt fully grounded as a Jew. And it occurs to me that at that time, I was the exact same age as the Gen Zer I described a minute ago. I shared this understanding of my Zionism with this person, and they smiled. Never in their life had they ever heard a Zionism described in such aspirational and responsible terms. How desperately I want to convey this aspirational poetry to the next generation. Unfortunately, real life will make this very difficult. In real life, there is less space for poetry and more attention given to news, and it's frightening. The history of the conflict between Israel and the Arab nations is heavy and fraught, and most people don't think about context when painful images of real human suffering overwhelms us constantly. When we live ourselves in a culture of moral panic, when fear that our society is collapsing into chaos, it is hard enough just to breathe, let alone hear poetry. But a little bit of context will help us nevertheless. I believe what can help us, I'm trying here, folks. What will help us is to be cognizant that at root, there are two original sins that cast long and lingering shadows. It would be helpful to remember these. One is that the Arab nations have never fully accepted that Jews have come home, period. The Jews, not that it should matter, but to some people it does, so I'm going to say it. I'm going to use the language. The Jews are the indigenous people of that land. We are re-indigenized. But the Jewish original sin, and we all need to take this to heart, the Jewish original sin, as described by historian Ari Shavit, is that when the Jews did start to come home, they did not see the Arabs living there. Both peoples need to do tshuva for these original sins. Now, of course, it's more complex than that. Jews have had really rich, loving relationships with Arabs. Arabs, in turn, understand say many, some, I don't know, but it's a fact. There's no such thing as a categorical statement. To many Arabs, the Jews have come home. But in a world beset by politics, geopolitics, fear, pain, and lots of other things happening at one time, these two ideas, these two shadows, might help us gain a little bit of bearing when we try to make sense of where we go from here. David Hartman taught a very important mitzvah for all of us to consider. This is not just about Jews and Arabs, this is about being a human being and in any community we live in. He taught that the mitzvah, ve'ahavta l're'echa kamocha, you shall love your neighbor as yourself. Everybody feels good when they hear it because it came from our Torah. We believe it. It's on bus stops in Pico Robertson. You shall love your neighbor as yourself. Hartman says, that's easy because your neighbor is like you. It's easy to love people like you. And that's why it appears only one time in the Torah. But the commandment to be kind to the stranger appears 36 times in the Torah. Why? Because it's inherently difficult to be kind to the other that is strange to you. This is a fundamental challenge to what I would call a modern Zionism. Not a Zionism of defense, but a modern Zionism that looks forward, that dreams. How we attend to the needs of the stranger among us ought to be a principle of our new Zionism. Now, mind you, it always has amongst the Jews I have known when I lived in Israel for 5 years. But it's not institutionalized. Not yet. As Ari Shavit illuminated, modern Zionism would do well to make sure it conscientiously attends to the non-Jewish citizens of Israel as well. Rabbi Daniel Hartman, Rabbi David Hartman's son, who is a luminary in his own right, talks about what he calls liberal Zionism. We need a liberal Zionism. And what is a liberal Zionism? It's a Zionism that first and foremost recognizes that Jews must be safe, that Jews can and should be normal, that Zionism should represent the best values of our people, that Zionism should value liberty, that Zionism should keep front and center that all human beings are created in the image of God. I would add one of my own, that Zionism should include somewhere a separation between synagogue and state, but that's for another sermon. I know that some recoil at the incongruity between this Zionism and what many of us are feeling when we watch what's on our screens. Again, real life is messy. Well, one thing I will say is that the power of our poetry, the power of our history and hope depends on all of us committing to one another according to the dictate of the rabbis, Kol Yisrael Arevim Zeh Lazeh. All Israel, every Jew, must see their life intertwined with the destiny of every other Jew. This, I think, more than anything, is what makes us a people. Jews the world over, and especially Israelis, are still mad with grief over the torture and suffering and murder wrought on October 7th by Hamas. Our fate is woven with Israel's, and we must remain determined to hold on to one another in support and solidarity, regardless of what we might feel about any present Israeli government. As Yossi Klein Halevi put it, be in the conversation. Critique. If you criticize, it means you're holding on. You know what's the opposite of love? It's not hate. It's indifference. We may not be indifferent to the state of Israel, to its people, and to its government, to its destiny. Yes, you do not vote there. You don't pay taxes there. But you have a right, and I would say, a mandate to criticize what you believe is not the best of what we ought to be. They don't have to listen, but care enough to say something. On this Judgment Day, we are obligated to hold many realities at once. Good people make mistakes, and for this, we give an account. Even just wars don't age well, and Israel's war on Hamas in Gaza has worn us thin. But of course, we should critique nevertheless, question what is happening, and just as one critiques oneself, and not how you might critique an other. Zionism is here to challenge us, and we can challenge Zionism as a full member of this people. This is has been at the heart of every Zionist Congress since its very first in 1897. Criticism of love, not a criticism of rejection. Our tradition tells us that Rosh Hashanah was the day that Joseph was freed from the darkness of the pit, the darkness of his dungeon. May this Rosh Hashanah be the turning point from which the 48 remaining hostages will be freed from their darkness, their dungeon, and Hamas's tunnels. And may we all be blessed to be released from the darkness of fear and trauma that all of us are living in since October 7th. By the eruptions of anti-Semitism, by the threat of chaos that swirls around us, and let us be given the chance to heal enough to go back to the business of writing the poetry of a Zionism of hope, a Zionism that envisions a state worthy of God's presence, a presence that would then dwell among all of us. May we finally know peace. Ken Yehi Ratzon. Shana Tova.